The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on March 11th, 2025. And now, here's your host, President of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, Pam Toompa.
Hey, Pam, how are you doing?
Dear. I'm good. So glad to have you back. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm glad to be back.
Oh, well, we are glad to have you. You have been missed very much. So thank you for being back and doing all the amazing work you do to put on this show. We truly appreciate it.
I try my best.
Oh, well, your best is awesome. And you know how people know that? When you have to be out for a little bit, all of a sudden everybody realizes how amazing you are.
Exactly. That's what I like.
Yeah, well, it's all true. And of course, we've known it. I've known it forever. But it sure is a great wake up call when people go, oh my gosh, what do we do now? So glad to have you back.
Thank you.
And welcome. You're welcome. And want to welcome everybody to the Business Matters radio show this Tuesday. Today, we're going to talk with Senator Troy Hashimoto, who has served in the Hawaii State Legislature since 2023, representing District 5, which includes Wailuku, Kahului, Waihe'i, and Waikupu. And then we're going to talk about our upcoming Business Matters event, which we're very excited about. But first, let me welcome Senator Troy Hashimoto. We are honored to have Senator Hashimoto with us, who is dedicated to his career in shaping Hawaii's policies and advocating for his home island of Maui, as well as all islands in Maui County and across the state of Hawaii. He is the fifth generation Maui resident who understands the unique challenges and opportunities facing his community. Holding both a bachelor's and MBA from the University of Denver, Senator Hashimoto has spent years working on policy and budgetary matters, first as an aide to the Maui County Council and later as a member of the Hawaii State Legislature. Again, he was appointed to the state Senate in 2023 and now serves as an assistant majority whip and vice chair of the Housing Committee. He's been tackling issues like housing affordability, education and infrastructure, and more. So we want to welcome Senator Troy Hashimoto. And Troy, we are so excited to have you with us today. How are you?
Yeah, good morning, Pam. I'm glad to be back. And, we're about at the halfway point of the legislative session. So we've seen a lot of bills move forward. A lot of them have unfortunately not moved forward, but we are really anxiously waiting to see what we can get done this session.
Well, I treasure all the work you do. And I have to say for us, this was an interesting year. We usually track about 800 bills. And this year we were tracking 1,500 bills. So when we get to that halfway point, in some cases, we're a little excited to see some of them go so we can focus on some of the critical issues. But, not all of the ones that are gone are what we had hoped for. But, how have you felt about the pace this legislative session?
I think it has. Every year, it always seems to be something different that you have to face and try and tackle. And this year, of course, all the buzz, and you see it every single day in the national news, is how do we deal with this new administration and some of their policies? And so some of the things that we are trying to grapple with is how does that impact our state budget? And secondarily, how does that impact the Maui recovery? And so I think we are trying to, frantically take a look at what potential programs are not going to be funded by the federal government. And we are trying to see how we might be able to fix that in the state budget, how make that impact our county partners. And of course, there are, big entities like the University of Hawaii that are potentially losing some federal dollars. But the hard part is that unfortunately our state budget won't be able to take care of everything if potential cuts do come down the pipeline. But so we are anxiously awaiting. I think we thought we were going to have a fairly okay budgetary year, but then of course these curveballs are coming down from the federal government, and so we need to figure out and tighten our belts just a little bit to make sure that we have the necessary funds to continue our core services. And I think that is very, very important. This safety social nets, that, making sure that the core things of government are continuing to operate, and we don't let that lapse for our community. So, I think this is a good point where we try and figure out what's really important. But, I think that's for those who are looking for some new and great, exciting expansion programs. Unfortunately, this may not be the year, which I think will make a lot of people disappointed.
No, I hear that, and as you point out, I mean, even as the chamber, we are really seeing just a huge increase of needs, and and with the 2-person staff, it's really challenging. But there's these urgent needs, and then of course there's needs of we've had successful programs and people want to expand, but it's a tight time to look at expanding things when you're just trying to, as you say, hang on to core services and meet the critical needs. So we greatly understand that, and I just want to say we know what a tough role that is, and the curveballs we've been thrown, which don't seem to end, they keep escalating, is a significant challenge for us. So I wanted to ask you a little bit, you've been very involved in housing. Can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in housing right now? And how is that progressing in this time when we've still got a critical need for housing on Maui, and especially with the recovery after the wildfires? How is that going forward?
Yeah. So, I think the good part is that we will continue to invest into the housing pipeline, because that is not necessarily cash that we spend on housing infrastructure and housing subsidies. That typically is a bond funding, so it's borrowed money, and we always have a capital budget, and so those are the things that when we may not have cash to spend, we will continue to fund those bigger projects, right? Those are things that we know we have to do. And so I think the big investment this year is we will make sure that we continue to make supplemental investments into the rental housing revolving fund. Now, the big concern now is when we were taking a look at all the projects that are applying for our rental housing revolving fund, the average cost of a single unit has gone up by $100,000 of subsidy. So typically, we will subsidize a unit to ensure that it stays in affordability for at least 30 years. And of course, we push that number up every single year because of the competition. But typically it's $160,000. But of course, with all of these, the uncertainty with labor, with materials, that number has gone up to about $260,000. And so the sad part is that we just cannot build as much as we used to, but we still know that we need to continue that pipeline. And so I think when we take a look at that number as it continually goes up, that really shows us that we need to now double down on things that will stretch the dollar. And so I think we are really looking at what are the type of infrastructure projects that we can do and invest in regionally within an area so that we can subsidize many housing developments instead of just one housing unit. So I think, I was glad when I attended Mayor Bisson's State of the County address. We're again talking about Waikapu Country Town area. I think that is a very, very important regional project where we all need to work between the state and the county to get those units off the ground. That is 1,200 units if we can figure that out. We know that we have to help with the Lahaina recovery, and they're working diligently on trying to figure out what type of infrastructure that they need within the Lahaina community. Now, the good thing about Lahaina is, in theory, we're supposed to get this $1.6 billion from the federal government, and a lot of that can go to housing redevelopment. But the hard part is us making sure that actually gets pulled down from the federal government, because all the people that would administer that grant is that they potentially are in limbo of actually continuing to work in the federal government. And so that we are making sure that we get as much of the paperwork done as possible. I was just talking to the managing director on how he's doing with that. They're trying to get that paperwork in for at least the first tranche of the planning phase. I think he said it was going to be about $75 million. They can pull down immediately as soon as they turn that in. But that is really critical, because all the needs that we're not able to meet, from things like insurance, and things that aren't covered by FEMA. It is supposed to be covered by this Community Development Block Grant disaster recovery funds. But that is key to our housing recovery. And so I think we really want to make sure that we can stay on that, because I know a lot of people want to get building and they may not have enough insurance money. And I know for the state, our big focus is to rebuild Front Street apartments. And so I've been working diligently to make sure that we can add more density to the Front Street apartments, which is a state-owned project. It was affordable, and we want to make sure we can keep it affordable. But those are the kind of things that we need to pay attention to make sure, number one, the financing is there, because that's typically the hardest part. And then all the other parts, such as the infrastructure, is there so that none of the ancillary things that are typically hard to do will stop a project from getting done.
Yes, and that's critically important. And I guess we'll reach out, because the critical thing is them getting that paperwork anytime. That seems like priority number one right now, is really making sure that we're getting that in time. I know there's a lot of meetings going on about the CDBG funding and getting a lot of input. But first and foremost, what we need to really do right now is make sure, and I think part of that is part of the paperwork, I guess, which is they need to submit some of the community input in some of the critical areas. But we're very worried about that CDBG funding, and it's a lot of money. I mean, it's, $1.6 billion is a lot of money that is desperately needed. But I love what you said also about looking at, we've been working on, talked about looking at density and looking at the Front Street apartments and looking at how you can build more density into that area that's already owned by the state. And, we're also always working to look at where we can look at infill projects. And Waikapu Town Country areas, again, it's a planned area. Do you see any ability within that area as well to build in more density?
I think that is within the conversation, because I think that, that was entitled by the developer, and then as a subsequent matter of how you develop that is they have those parcels off to people who actually build. And so I think there are opportunities for us to figure out, okay, can you sell it to developers that may not necessarily just do single family homes, but maybe they want to replicate the Kaulana Mahina model, which is right across from Long's down the street, which is a nice complex with nice amenities, and it's not single family homes, but I think that's what we need to take a look at. I think one of the biggest challenges is that it's a lot of moving parts. One of the biggest things that's holding up a lot of development, especially infill within Central Maui, is both the wastewater and just the water needs. And so I think what we've been pushing at the state level is we've been trying to partner with the counties to build a brand new wastewater treatment plant in that Waikapu area. And so that is I believe is almost completed through the EIS phase, and now they're going to get into the planning phase to make sure that happens. And so we can't use wastewater as an excuse. And this is a Central Maui problem. And so I think that is critical for us to get done. And of course, the other big thing is we need just more water. And I think we've been working with the State Water Commission to conduct more studies on where we can add more water resources. Because without those two things, we can't do those easy infill projects and, of course, the larger developments. And so that's working in tandem with the larger regional infrastructure projects. I think the same goes with West Maui. West Maui, always water will at some point stop further redevelopment and development of new units. And so it's something that we have to work on island-wide. And, of course, upcountry is notorious as well.
That's very true. I know that some people looking at desalinization. Has there been any studies or more work at the state level on that as a water possibility to help get new water?
It actually has been a topic of discussion here at the legislature. I think we are in the phase of wanting to study it more. I think we need to bring all the smartest minds together to figure out if that is an option. So that's moving. The other low-hanging fruit that we know needs to be a part of the conversation is how do we use our recycled water, the R1 water that's coming out of our treatment plants. We know in West Maui that we no longer can inject it. But we need to look at it as a resource. But the big problem is, how do we then take that R1 water and appropriately use it? Because in theory, what you want to do is you want to take that R1 water and displace it with what are you using potable water for. So if you're using any type of irrigation with potable water, you want to replace that with the R1 water. But the infrastructure of figuring that all out is quite costly, but it is an option. So we do have a lot of options on the table. As you said, we have the desal option, we have the R1 option, but we do need to continue to invest in all of those options, because water will continue to be a highly sought after commodity for many years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to go back to and say how much we appreciate the state coming to that. The Waikapu Town Country Project is an amazing project, and how the state came together to look at the water and the wastewater component, because we have right now everything's our major facilities are at the harbor, very close to the ocean, and so it's really important that we have some additional capacity in those areas in a big way, to have additional plants ready to help us, because with all the things happening with climate change and the the type of changing weather conditions we're seeing, and high waves at times that are really astronomical, this gives us some insulation also from a sustainability and security standpoint as well.
Absolutely. I think we need to be thinking down the road. I think some of these projects are never easy. But if you never start on them, then we will never get them done. And, I think people look at the timeline and it's a little daunting, but we just have to keep chipping away at it. And hopefully, we will then open up a lot of these problems that we have for many years.
Yeah. No, it's true. And and again, building in resiliency, looking ahead and building in resiliency. And I know that's something you folks are looking at quite a bit. Speaking of resiliency, we have so many businesses really struggling, and I always tell people it's because we did what we were supposed to do with tourism, which is we took the investment in the visitor industry and with the hotels and bringing guests in and the airlines, and then we leveraged it very well in restaurant and retail and activities and events and so much more. But now we have so many businesses really struggling because, the degree to which we're down is crippling some companies, and especially some of those companies that need, a certain amount of guests to make things pencil out. Can you tell us a little bit about where you see tourism going right now after the pandemic, and specifically for Maui, again, with the pandemic and the wildfires? So many are just really, they took on COVID loans during the pandemic. They didn't want to take on SBA loans during the wildfires. They had hoped for grants, but it just hasn't really materialized in a way that was meaningful for Pivot. So how do you see us rebuilding our visitor industry, which has been our economic engine for decades, and helping businesses survive during this time?
Absolutely. I think it's been very frustrating for me, because every time I'm out in the community, I think there's always business owners who are telling me how difficult it has been over, since the fire, and that they continue to struggle. I think it's a dual type of, there's multi-purposes on why they're struggling. Part of it is, the labor market is very, very difficult. I think partly it's just the general slowdown. I think, partly it's increasing costs. And so I think business owners these days, I feel for them. And I think when we take a look at from a state perspective, we really need to understand what can we bring to the table to change the dynamic of what is going on Maui. And so I think when we talk to the Hawaii Tourism Authority, who is supposed to be the marketing arm for the state, and also the management arm for the state of tourism, I look to them to really have a strong plan. I think they've been trying to roll out some marketing efforts for Maui. I think the governor has set aside another $5 to $6 million for another emergency marketing campaign. But I think those are the things that need to jumpstart this recovery. But I think the interesting thing is when I travel a little bit and go to different conferences, people still ask, is it okay to come to Maui?
Yes.
And, I tell them, of course it is. But I think that's the message that I've been trying to tell the tourism authority, that you have to clearly articulate across, all of our big markets, is because I think people seem to still be very hesitant to come to Maui. And this to me is coupled with the high rates of staying at the hotels. And I think when you take a look at how much the hotels are charging, people can likely get to Maui pretty reasonably on airfare rates. But once they get here, I think it's very daunting to get them to find a place that's affordable to stay. And so that's problematic. I think if we want to get back to some semblance of the volume, and we're not saying we want potentially all the tourists that we had pre-fire, pre-pandemic, but we do need to have volume, right? Because that volume trickles down to the regular businesses that are operating on a day-to-day basis. So if we want to save our small businesses, you need that volume. And so I think we need to work with the hotels, and I've been trying to convey this to the tourism authority, that we need to figure out how to work with the hotels to somehow at least bring down the rate. But part of it is, I think their rate is still high because they have the labor shortage. And so part of that labor shortage is likely, linked to our housing shortage. And so it's all connected, and we have to continue chipping away at it. But I think we as a state plays a big role in it. And I've been telling my friends at the county and the county council, they need to have a hand in this economic recovery as well. They used to fund the Maui Visitors Bureau. I know that there was some frustrations with them. They cut off all funding, but they need to be a part of the conversation to really think about our economic future. And we all need to be in it together.
Absolutely. And it really isn't. It really isn't a hotel. People really need to understand the trickle-down effect and how the impact on visitors in Maui County. I think in many cases we may be the most dependent island on the visitor industry in the state. But when that industry is hurting and we don't have the, again, I think we all know we want regenerative tourism. We all know we're not looking, well, I shouldn't say we all, you and I and many others know we're not looking at the same levels as pre-pandemic and just before the wildfires. We're looking for balance, but we also have to find a balance that sustains our overall community. And this is a huge challenge. And you're absolutely right. In many regions across the U.S., the local Chamber of Commerce is the local Visitors Bureau. Here in Hawaii, we have such a big visitor industry that we need a Visitors Bureau specifically because the industry is so large and so important to our overall economic health. But we get those calls all the time because, again, people think, Chamber of Commerce, they're going to, they represent the visitor industry. So, and we do. We just don't do it the same way many counties do. But it's that sentiment is very true. This far after COVID, this far after the wildfires, and of course, once a leading government official, whether it's a mayor or a governor, says don't come to Maui, that holds us back for quite some time. And we saw this during COVID with Governor Ige, and so this is a known thing that then sends a ripple effect that is really hard to reverse. So I'm glad that you're saying, look, we've got to reverse this message ASAP. And many of our businesses say exactly that. Why isn't there more messaging that says, we welcome you back? And of course, there were many who said, why wasn't there clear messaging and more promotion early on to say, we're being sensitive and we need to protect Lahaina after the wildfires. But there are other places to visit and to please come. Troy, we'll be right back. We've got a quick news break and we'll be right back.
All right. Thank you.
So Troy, we were talking a little bit about, this critical messaging. Do you see that coming down anytime soon, or how can we help?
Right. So we are working with the Hawaii Tourism Authority to make sure that is top of mind on their on what they need to deliver. The unfortunate part is if you get into the weeds and you read the news about the Hawaii Tourism Authority, what we really need from them is to have them rebuild as an entity. I think the unfortunate part is they are struggling a little bit to get their leadership figured out. They currently have an interim executive director, and we're trying to make that permanent. But for some reason, the Hawaii Tourism Authority board can't figure out what salary to set for that new executive director. And so we're hopefully we will get past that. But once we're past that, I think we need to all, coalesce around a specific plan on what we're going to use state money for on their marketing efforts. But I did push them to create a Maui marketing plan on what are the levers that they need to pull to bring awareness to what Maui needs. And so I think they are fully aware of how that something needs to happen relatively soon. But I think it is a road to recovery that we're going to have to keep pushing them to focus on, because I think we are not there with our economic recovery, and we have a long way to go, and they need to be acutely aware of how to assist us.
Well, I appreciate the oversight that you're looking at and the diligence, and I think it's tragic that a salary, in confirming an executive director is holding things up, because this is a critical time, and of course the state saw that with Lahaina down, after the wildfires, how much of a hit the entire state took. So anything that we can do, I think, having had this conversation, I'll reach out to them as well.
For the listeners, they should know that we do have good representation on the Hawaii Tourism Authority board. Lisa Paulson, who's now at the Food Bank and used to be the head of the Lodging Association, she was newly appointed. And then, of course, we have Mike White, my former boss, former general manager of Kaanapali Beach Hotel, is also on that board. So we need to push them to come to resolution and continue advocating loudly for Maui.
Thank you. And then that's great to share. I appreciate you sharing that, because we do have great representation, but it's time. I mean, it's really time, and every minute we waste just takes us, much longer in recovery. And some can't, are at the edge of their rope right now. We don't know how much longer some of these small businesses can hang on. It's really a challenge. Well, and earlier you mentioned, and of course, part of this is related to the visitor industry and some of the downturns businesses are seeing. And I appreciate you sharing. It is a lot of things right now. It is, for many, part of a down economy, but there are so many issues, as you said. And one of them is also what we've seen is a shrinking labor pool after the pandemic. And, so many businesses looking for employees. Can you tell us anything that the state is doing on this area? I know there's some workforce training programs to help people look at pivoting. How can we best address, building up our labor pool again in these challenging economic times?
Well, a lot of it is looking at it holistically, right? And I think that's the biggest competition. And this has been a trend even before the fires, even before the pandemic. Hawaii is in a downward population trend, right? We are losing more people than we are gaining people, and so we are in a population decline. And I think every family is facing this. Every family member is saying it knows people that are within their own family that are choosing to go to Vegas, to Washington, Oregon, Utah, you name it, we're moving away from Hawaii. That's one of our biggest exports. And so I think we are acutely aware of that at the legislature. And so we have to figure out how do we stop that. We spoke previously about the housing. Housing is critical. We need to bring down the cost of housing, because that's the biggest amount that you're paying every single month in your paycheck. And, and the higher that goes, the lower your take home pay is. The other thing that we are really doubling down and focusing on is what do we do with our educational opportunities here in the state and on our specific island. I think Maui College really needs to be at the forefront on what they're educating our young people and those who want to go back to school to get degrees. Is the degrees that they are offering, is that what's relevant in the workplace that's going to lead to immediate job placement? And because I think a lot of the people in the business world, they may not think that, okay, we get someone who is a graduate, but do they have the skills needed to thrive in the industry? And so I think Maui College definitely needs to step up to help with those gaps. I think one of the big things that we're trying to help them this legislative session is is in the healthcare space, because we don't have enough nurses. We're notorious for bringing in traveling nurses, and so one of the things that I asked the chancellor is, okay, how can we expand the nursing program? And so we're going to actually try and do a 4-year on-island degree for the nursing program, and I think that will take some money that we may not have this session, but I think I want my colleagues to be committed to helping to expand that program, because it's so important as it relates to the workforce. And so you will see that at the legislature. There's a bill moving that will try and push to make that happen. But I think it's something that we need to ask ourselves at every university campus: are they producing the type of graduates that will help our industry? And if not, we need to make sure the university changes to comport with what we need in the workforce. And so that's one component. Of course, as you were talking about, we do have other types of internship programs that we're offering so that students will get to experience various industries. And then, of course, in the DOE, we hear about all these college pathways, but I think a lot of it is we need to make sure that students are aware that we also still have a very vibrant and robust trade industry, right? The operating engineers do a wonderful job. The carpenters union does a wonderful job in these trainings, and we need to make sure that they get the labor force that they also need. And so we cannot always, focus on college and career ready. We need to make sure that we focus on all options for students so that there is no gap when they're trying to select a career, and they know that there's a whole lot of options out there rather than a traditional path. And so I think we'll continue to work on that. I think we made progress over the last couple of years, but we need to somehow keep all of our high school graduates here in Hawaii. We know that a lot of them want to try the mainland, but we need to make sure that they're clear on what offerings we have here in Hawaii, so at least we have a shot of keeping them in the workforce.
Yeah, that's very true. And also to your point, as you mentioned, housing as well is, again, Hawaii has a very high cost of living here. There are so many different things, being an island state, that raise our costs, and it's not going down. So we've been looking at ways to, also with there's bills in this legislative session to look at, even for businesses. Okay, we have one of the worst rankings in the nation in terms of being a business-friendly environment. We have so many kind of generational or pieces of legislation that are creating so many difficulties for small businesses to operate. What do how do you see us tackling some of these historical things? I mean, some of the things we can make some shifts on in terms of a cost of living, addressing housing, the workforce development. I know there's new moves to look at how, we can help with childcare programs and those kinds of things. How do we get to the root of being a business-friendly environment and overcoming some of this longstanding history of regulation and costs for businesses to operate in, and the taxes and more? How do we chip away at some of those things so that we can be a more business-friendly environment and spur more industry? And especially, how do we do that in times like this, when we're seeing, a downturn and a lot of struggles and people moving away?
Well, that's a really, really good question. And I think part of that is obviously trying to help businesses in their early phases, in that incubation phase. I think we do have a business of, economic development and tourism that's supposed to be focused on helping the businesses out there. Obviously, I think it's like anything in government, they focus on certain things, and but unfortunately we're not good at reinventing ourselves and trying to figure out what are the newest and greatest ways to help these small businesses, especially in these early times. I think one of the things that we've been trying to invest in is a pipeline of how do we encourage entrepreneurship, right? So part of it is we at the college we have the new Maui Food Innovation Center. So that's one aspect to come up with a concept. I think the next phase that we are trying to find a location for is how does someone, once they come up with a new concept, then get to build out their concept at a facility, because at that point they may not be ready to build their own commercial kitchen. And so we're trying to build a kind of a community commercial space where you can expand your business and work in, to really prove your concept and to build up your business before then you go out on your own. But those are the types of programs that we need to take a look at, and how do we continue incubating that and how do we grow that? So that's one aspect of it. The other thing, obviously, is just the regulatory aspect. So if you're going to open a storefront, and I just didn't realize how crazy this is you're going to get a storefront, you're going to want to do building improvements, and you're going to have to go get a lease, but you're going to have to then go through county permitting and wait for your permit to then proceed to do the tenant improvements, and that can be a very long period of time, and yet you're holding the bag on the rent that you have to pay. And so it's some of those startup things, and these are for potentially new businesses that are trying to get started, even, and they're incurring all of this debt. So we have to figure some process to make that go quickly. I think in general, permitting is a problem, and so we know we're trying to bring that time down. We're working with the counties, because it's all counties throughout the state that have this same problem, to make sure that the building can go a little bit faster, because we know that spans a lot of different industries, not only the business sector, but if you want to build a house, the housing sector. So they're all of the components that need to be looked at. And then, of course, the last part is the fees and the taxation that we require, right? We have a general excise tax. It's a trickle down, because we put a tax on every single step of the way. So at the point of wholesale, at the point of retail sale, we're taxing that. And so I think we need to take a look at our tax structure to really figure out if the pressure is on the right people. So last session, you might have heard that we had one of the biggest tax break on income. And so that was aimed at the lower income tax brackets. But I think that if you take a look at our bigger tax plan, we're really trying to figure out, okay, where should we move that income tax? We believe that income taxes our local residents, and we should move that taxation method to other areas. And I think one of those discussions is that real property tax, which is controlled by the county, because we do have a lot of outside buyers who own real property tax. Should they get taxed more? Do we shift it to the TAT? But I think a lot of people in the visitor industry are saying, well, the TAT is already too much, right? It's discouraging a lot of visitors. But at least we're having this conversation on where the tax burden should actually lie. That will encourage our local people to stay in state, and in turn help our small businesses and our industry throughout our islands.
Well, it's great to hear, and I think you're right. I mean, we have to keep chipping away. There's so much that we can look at in terms of our regulatory environment. The real well, I do want to talk about the real property tax, but first I want to talk about what you were sharing in terms of the county permits. This is something that we're jumping into as well. We're continuing to hear, and it's been interesting because people are reluctant to share this because of the wildfires, because they want to make sure that our families that have been impacted in Lahaina are taken care of first. But I have just heard several really challenging stories on how businesses have been held up, and as you say, they're on the hook for paying rent, and they can't move in and make money until they get these permits in place. And they've been held up for very long periods of time. And the challenge is both the state and county are losing money when these businesses aren't operating. So it behooves us to get these permits in and get them operating to keep things moving and bringing in new income. And of course, sustaining these organizations. Some of them are at the end of their rope. They've been waiting for permits so long. It's a huge challenge. So that's really critically important as we start moving forward, and the incubators are very helpful. And we have so many amazing business support services on Maui, and at so many different levels. And so I also want to say to folks, if you're listening, if you're challenged and you're struggling with some of these things, please call us at the Maui Chamber of Commerce. We're here to help. And we're serving everybody. We know some people, even some of our members are struggling to pay their dues, and many people can't afford dues right now, but we're still here to help. So do reach out to us on these issues. But I'm really glad to know that, these things are being worked on. We are here to help. And we're happy to be a part of the solution, Troy. So I'll reach out to you on that, but also on the real property tax. We are working with the county right now. And as you point out, there are people investing in our island that are non-owner occupied. And we feel the current bans in the county really give a great incentive by, after it's 5 million plus, but you're in the final band. And so you're at the highest tier when we know that many people own properties that are much higher than that on island, and the value is much higher. So we're looking at ways to work with the county administration to say we maybe need to look at these tiers. And also because the median home prices are rising, that moves some of our local residents into higher tiers sooner. And so we want to expand those bands for local owner occupied to protect, what's happening in their world as valuations are going up, to make sure that they're protected and stay in lower tiers without seeing that higher escalation. So I'd love to connect with you on that, since you folks are also looking at that, because we see that as an important thing that we can do right here in Maui County. And hopefully this budget session, I've spoken to Yuki Sugimura, who likes this idea. So we hope to implement something in this budget session that'll make a measurable difference on that.
Well, real quick on that, I think one of the biggest things that the council will be facing is the potential phase out of some of the short-term rentals. And I personally, I think at the legislature, we specifically passed the bill to allow the counties to choose to amortize or phase out some of the short-term rentals. But, I think even though we gave them that power, one of the biggest tools that the county does not utilize effectively to control short-term rentals is the power of taxation. And I think the power of taxation goes a very long way. And they have to use that tool a little bit more effectively. I think you're right. You lower the rate for those who are living on island full time, which I think we actually do have one of the larger exemptions. But you have to control the rest of those properties of people that don't live here. You have to increase that rate, because then it disincentivizes them to hold that property and potentially get it back into local hands. But the county needs to use that power of taxation versus banning things, because banning things to me is too difficult. At least you generate revenue from the power of taxation. And I think Maui has kind of set up the rates pretty well to make sure that you can differentiate between different values of properties as well. But I think that is a very important tool that they have not effectively used as an effective land use tool. And I hope they will look more into that.
I hear you. I do. Yeah. And again, I agree with you. With the bands, we have levers and ways to operate between those bands. So that is a great way to address it. And I don't know how the other counties do, but in what we're looking at now, we feel that the model works. In some cases, maybe it would be helpful to have a fourth band, but this is not that time. But in the meantime, we still have a lot of power within the three levels that we have. Right. So that's a great point. Well, Troy, as always, we love having you on this show. You are a treasure trove of information. And more importantly, we appreciate your heart and your staunch support of not only Maui County and the entire state, always looking at innovative ways, always looking at what can be done differently, and your great leadership. Thank you so much for all that you do for all of us in Maui County and throughout the state. We really appreciate you.
Thank you, Pam. And if anyone has any questions, concerns, please feel free to reach out to me. You can just shoot me an email at senhashimoto@capital.hawaii.gov, and we will get back to you and get you the information that you need.
Thank you, Troy. I hope you have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Take care.
You too. Aloha. Oh, it's always great to have Senator Hashimoto on with us. He is just a gem, and we really appreciate him. So I want to share a little bit. We've been talking about business matters for a couple of weeks now, and it is our upcoming annual festival that we do. This year is called Vintage Aloha. Each year, our Mix and Mingle event has a different theme. So this year is Vintage Aloha. It's going to be on Saturday, March 29th at the Grand Wailea from 6 to 9:30 p.m. We have some amazing entertainment during the cocktail and networking hour that people will enjoy, including acoustic-style performance from Joe Chi. We've got themed photo stations to capture all the classic looks and memorable moments of the evening. We're going to have a phenomenal dinner show from Amaka Production. Excuse me, I keep saying this wrong. My apologies. From Amakua Productions. I'm looking at my notes at a distance. That will take our guests on a trip back in time, and we're going to conclude the evening with our local favorite, Nuff Said. So many things happening with BizMix this year. Attendees will also enjoy delicious food and wine during a dinner with various themed food stations from Grand Wailea chefs. Chef Mark McDowell of 62 Market and Patelli House are also going to join us. And you may know Patelli House is a local food truck, but they're making Hawaiian food for us. And then we're going to have specialty cocktails with local beer and seltzer from our alcohol sponsor, Maui Brewing Company. So there's just so much going on. But we want to share a big mahalo to the many sponsors who have come in. Our Golden Aloha sponsor is Alpha Inc. Our Trans-Pacific Trailblazers sponsor is Ainolani Pacific. Our Vintage Voyager sponsors are Airbnb, Aloha International Employment, and HC&D. Our Island Explorer sponsors are Oahu Sushi and Goodfellow Brothers and Pacific Rim Land. Our Jet Setter sponsors are 5A Rent-A-Space, Hawaiian Electric Company, HMSA, Matson, Maui Health, State Farm Agency of Kit Okazaki's, and Zippy, and media sponsors Encore and Pacific Media Group. And if you want to have your business name on this list, there's still time to reserve a sponsorship. All the levels can be found at mauichamber.com. All sponsorship levels come with tickets, so your team can experience the fun and connect with other businesses. And tickets are available. So we are encouraging everybody to register by March 19th to ensure that they are included in the marketing materials, and individual tickets can be purchased again at mauichamber.com. And beyond the fun of attending BizMix, you can also know that your contributions through tickets and sponsorships go to serving the programs of the Maui Chamber of Commerce dedicated to economic recovery initiatives, small business growth, educational programs, and business support services, which are vital to the continued growth and success of our Maui businesses and our community. So we don't want you to miss out on this premier business event of the year. Again, visit us at mauichamber.com. And we want to thank you all for joining us today for Business Matters. It's been an exciting day. The key to the show is to help you learn more, and we hope you all got something amazing out of this program today. And we hope you'll join in again next Tuesday, right at this same hour from 7:05 to 7:58 a.m. for Business Matters. And unfortunately, our rebroadcast has been moved, so don't look for us on Friday. We'll just be here every Tuesday morning and hope to have you back again next week. Ahui